Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about whether the labor shortage problem will ever end, and joining us to contribute to the conversation is Ira Wolfe. Welcome, Ira.
Hey, thanks, Shanna. Love this topic, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some people some tips on CPR.
Sounds great. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I've been in this world, in this lifetime. I've been in business for 40 some years, but I've been in this world for the last 27. I started my company, Success Performance Solutions, about 27 years ago. We primarily work with organizations, helping them hire better people through employee assessments, pre-employment and leadership tools, and that's continued to evolve. But my passion's always been looking at the future of work and labor trends, and I've written a number of books on that. And it's all sort of converged in the last 2 or 3 years.
It's interesting how life does that. I think they all, we learn certain things for a reason, and it all seems to come together at some point. But well, we're
It's
very
never
excited.
over until it's over, right?
Exactly. We're very excited to have you. It's interesting. I guess a lot of us are asking the question, man, when will we be past this labor hiring problem and having to fight each other for scarce resources? And I think you're saying it may not ever end. So maybe we just start there and talk about a little bit what's going on and what we're seeing.
Yeah, the simple answer is it won't end. And I know a lot of your listeners will be very, very disappointed about that. I know, worldwide, we're having a bit of an economic slowdown. Inflation's high, economic slowdown. We're based in the U.S., so a lot of the, we're hit with that number every day. The job openings, the number of, the amount of hiring is slowing a bit. The number of companies that are laying off, especially in the technology industry, is starting to pick up a little bit. But what's interesting is this could be the first recession, if they qualify that as a recession. I know there's debate whether we're in a recession or not, but whether we are or not, we're in an economic slowdown. But this could be the first time since 1945, before most of the people probably listening are born. Since 1945, that the GDP, that we would have a recession or an economic downturn, and that the unemployment rate did not rise in concert with that. So the economy falls, people lay off, they're out of jobs, companies cut back, and the unemployment rate typically goes up. In the U.S., the lowest unemployment rate in any of the 12 recessions since 1945 was 6.1%. In the U.S., we're currently at 3.6%, and the consensus is, and I'm not an economist, so I listen to the experts, but the consensus is among most experts that they expect that it will rise to about 4.6 or 4.7%, maybe 5%, but nobody's predicting it's going to go much higher than that. That's full employment. And so we're in what they call a job full downturn versus some of the listeners may be familiar with the jobless recovery. And we certainly faced that, after the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, the housing crisis. And then it took almost 10 years to really get back to that rapid pace. This is the opposite. This is a job full downturn, and that they're really not expecting this to go off. And there was on LinkedIn, it was passing around about 2-3 weeks ago, that somebody wrote that many managers, they did a survey, many managers were looking almost optimistically toward a recession because it would ease the labor shortages. I mean, that's crazy. We're going to crash our business so we can hire more people, but we can't hire people because the business is bad. So it was a silly argument. It's not going to happen. And right before the show, I gave you an example, and I think this is the most telling part. This is the graphic. This is the image, if you can visualize this, that really says why this is going to be different and this isn't going away. In the late 60s and early 70s, we had the baby boom. We had the baby boom before that, but the baby boomers were coming of age, including myself. We were entering the workforce. And every single year, there were 2.5 million new workers that were entering the workplace for a period of almost 8 to 10 years. Then in the 80s, we had a little bit of a downturn, economic downturn, but we had Gen X, and Gen X was only half as big as the baby boomers. So there were 76 million baby boomers. There was only 40 million Gen X. They entered the workforce. Little bit of a blip on the radar, but people were piling into the workforce. And then the economy's picked up again. So we had the dot-com boom, and then we had the early 2000s, and the millennials entered the workforce. And they struggled a little bit because the economy wasn't booming, but there was a lot of fresh blood. There was a lot of new people. 2.5 million people again were entering the workforce every single year. Then the economy picked up in the late 2015, 2016. We had the boom until the pandemic hit. And the one thing that people don't realize is that when they look at this graph, we had a peak and we had a peak, and all of a sudden we're in this valley down here. Currently, compared to 2.5 million new workers every year, we have 400 to 500,000 new workers through Gen X, and then through Generation Alpha, which is apparently, I guess, will be the new name for the next. Through probably 2035 or 2040, it's going to be pretty consistent because our birth rate, again, in the US collapsed. We went from 2.4 to 1.6%, or 1.6 babies per family from 2.5. So the fertility rate fell. That was covered up for years by two factors: immigration and women entering the workforce. So between 1950 and 2020, there were the participation rate of women doubled. It used to be in 1950, only 1 out of 3 women worked. In 2020, almost 2 out of 3 women worked, almost a 30% increase. So we masked that. So there was a lot of women coming into the workforce. Immigration was high. So we had a lot of immigrants coming in that were supporting that. And we still had all the baby boomers were still working. The millennials were still working. We had Gen X and then Gen Z coming in the workforce, and even some what we call veterans, traditionalists, those born before 1945. So through the last 20 years, when people say, "Oh yeah, we heard this before," yeah, you did, and we've lived through it. But there was a lot more dynamics going on. Currently, we have very small population, that 400,000 Gen Z coming into the workplace every year. We don't have it in the US. We virtually have no immigration, very, very slow, especially in a lot of the frontline jobs and the jobs that people are looking for people to hire. And the baby boomers are exiting finally. I mean, the baby boomers some of them 80 almost 80 years old. So they're either not able to work, they're finally choosing to retire. 1.5 million baby boomers died because of the pandemic. So there's a loss of baby boomers, no immigration, not a lot of new people coming into workforce, and we still have jobs. I mean, it's not that we dropped to 100 million jobs. We still have 140 million jobs out there. And that's essentially why we've had more job openings than we've had people to fill them. And that's just going to continue. The more baby boomers that they get out, the more nurses that are exhausted and stressed out and burnt out. And I'm sure we can talk about that. But, part of the problem is the burden's falling on a lot of the people that are working, and they're quitting at record rates. The most recent rate in the US was 4.2 million workers quit their jobs. It used to be averaged about 2.5 million a month, 4.2 million. It's down about 100,000 from what it was, but it's still at a record high. It's still above 4 million people quitting their jobs, despite the fact that we have these massive layoffs announced by Amazon and Google and Facebook, and some of the banks are starting to lay off. Despite that fact, we still have people quitting their job. And it's because they have choices, because there's other people hiring. So hiring didn't stop, hiring slowed. And there's a big difference, because when you're hiring at a rapid pace, if you're going 100 miles an hour and you slow down to 60, you're still moving at a good rate of speed. And there's still a lot of job openings there. So this just,
Definitely.
ultimately this isn't going away. And I've been studying this since the late 90s. And we predicted this wasn't unusual. We just didn't, the only thing we didn't predict was a pandemic. I know Bill Gates did. He said we were, but we didn't predict the pandemic. But the pandemic was just the straw that broke the camel's back, literally. It didn't cause it. It's not a blip on the radar. This is very real. And I know that's disappointing news to a lot of your listeners, but it is reality. And now we need to figure out how to give it some CPR.
So I guess Elon Musk and his 10 kids aren't going to single-handedly solve the problem then.
No, he was, he's one of the people that was forcing, there's a whole other topic we can just talk about is things that companies are doing right and wrong. But so he's going to force everybody to come back to work,
right.
where the trend is significantly, people are saying, if I have to go back to work 5 days a week, I'm going to quit. Because one is I found a life. I found some work-life balance, work-life integration, whatever you want to call it. No, I don't want to spend $5-6 a gallon of gas and spend an hour and a half every day, trying to get to work, trying to get home. And now, in fact, yesterday I was on a meeting, 3 people in the offices, in one office, and it's not that big of a business. Everybody was on their own Zoom call. They weren't even in the same room working together in the same office.
Oh, I was
They
doing
were
that
all
back in 2011. I mean, we were on global projects, so I was on
Yeah, but
conference
this
calls
is
all
this
day
is all
long.
in the same building. It's
Oh,
a
I know.
small
That's what I
business.
mean. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
in the same building,
It
but we
was
weren't
just
on
easier
calls
not to get
together.
out of get out of their desk and move away. So, and they said, oh yeah, we were going to we were all going to go in the same room, but we had to set up the equipment. So they all did it differently. And now they may find it okay, but a lot of people say, if I have to do that, I'd rather be home taking care of my kids, being with there was a survey that was just out that dog owners were willing to take a 10% pay cut if they can stay home with their dogs. And 50% of dog owners would quit if they had to go back to the office every day. I mean,
I don't have an issue though with what Elon's doing, in the sense that if that's the culture he wants to create and those are the people he wants to attract, he'll change his mind if he can't get people in. But there's a lot of people who want to work for a company like his, and that might be kind of strategic. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody should have to return to work, but I guess what I'm saying is, as a leader of a company, we're all responsible for creating the culture of our organization. And some of that is driven by the rules and policies you have in place. And so if he thinks that he's going to be able to build the culture that he wants by demanding everybody be in the office, go for it. But then it's limiting, as you're saying, it's limiting your pool of potential applicants or potential employees.
Oh, well, you're absolutely right. And for a company like that to work for Tesla, to work for Elon Musk, to have that on your resume, there's no question that there's going to be a number of people that are willing to do that. And there's other companies like that, but that's the exception. I mean, not everybody's going to be a Tesla and everybody's going to be an Elon Musk. I mean, it's the average, privately owned business. And let's be real here. When we talk about working remote, that even at the height of the pandemic, it was only 47% of workers were remote. There are certain jobs that just couldn't be done. You couldn't. Now there were in healthcare. There was, billing could be done remotely. We certainly saw physicians remotely for some routine calls. But ultimately, the nurses. I mean, you saw it. I mean, you needed people on staff. Many manufacturing processes need to be done that way. Truck drivers, we're still not in autonomous vehicles. We needed lots of truck drivers. We needed grocery workers. We needed frontline workers. We still like to go to restaurants, and maybe some of it will be automated and there'll be some robotics, but ultimately there's a lot of jobs, and more than currently they're estimating about 60% of all jobs will still be, at least for the next 10 years, have to be on site. They have to be in person. Over time, that number will continue to increase. But then we also have to be realistic, is that before the pandemic, there was only 2% of 100% remote jobs.
Mm.
And now we're about 20%. So it's it's a 10 times increase, a tenfold increase during that period of time. So when all the emphasis is on, do you come to work? Is it hybrid? Is it remote? Is it in person? We're only talking about maximum about 40% of all positions that can possibly be that. Now we have a lot more service work, knowledge workers, professional workers, so attorneys who said, oh, we have to have a big corporate office and I'll come to there. A lot of it, law firms are now remote. Accounting firms are remote. There are many other procedures or professions that have gone remote, even engineering. But there still is a place for that. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's some industries, some jobs that have to be remote or have to be in person. If that's your culture, then say it's your culture, and you're going to attract certain people. Working for Tesla, you probably could attract people that are willing to move across country around the world to have that experience. There's a lot of other jobs that just, that doesn't have that aura around it. It's not a magnet. And I think that's the wake-up call for most businesses, that if it can be done remote or hybrid, even part of the time, it probably should be. But that's making it hard for managers because, you got to. Gallup has been studying. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with this. Gallup's been studying engagement for a long time, 30 some years, and the old. Everybody's familiar with this. 70% of workers have been disengaged. Only 30% of workers were engaged. Well before the pandemic, nothing changed. They just released the new State of the Workforce report, and it's pretty devastating, where they now measure engaged and thriving. So I can be engaged at work, but I'm sort of on the status quo. I'm going through the motions, and I'm okay. I enjoy what I do, but eventually, if something better came along, I would go. So when they looked at how many people were engaged and thriving, 57% said they were not engaged and not thriving. There was still a third that were just not engaged, but there was almost double that said they're not thriving. Even more devastating was 19% said they were miserable. Now, miserable means in the last 24 hours, they felt angry, worried, anxious, stressed, or were in physical pain. So 1/5 of the workforce is saying that I'm not coming 100, I'm not there 100%. I've got a lot of stuff going on. And I think that's what's really, really significant, that companies can no longer afford to tolerate that, because if those people either go out on sick leave, they quit, they find another opportunity, they find they're better off working remotely, working hybrid, they're going to leave, and it's not that easy to replace them anymore.
Yeah, and so when we're talking about, the shortage not going to be resolved, because of birth rate and immigration and things like that, I find people to be very ingenuitive, and so I would imagine that would push forward innovation, because you're going to have to solve the shortage problem, and the easiest way probably to solve it is going to be through different innovation. For instance, I walked by a restaurant the other day, and there was a robot delivering food. Like they still had people, servers at like the front kitchen area, putting the food on the robot, but then the robot would take it to the tables. A lot of companies have kept the QR code for ordering, instead of going back to, your traditional table service. So, in your research and what you've come across, what are we seeing? What else are we seeing in regards to innovation solving labor shortage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's no question there's going to be a lot more innovation. Taco Bell is just announced that they're opening their second restaurant. It's a 2-story restaurant. They're going to have 4 drive-throughs. And basically, if you call through the order, It's going to be all robotics. It's prepared through robotics. It's automated. It comes down the chute. But even that's not old. If for those who are old enough or remember, you might have read the book by Tom Freeman, "The World is Flat." I remember, and I only remember this because it was ironic. I had the book. I was reading it on the plane. I was flying to Missouri to see a client in Cape Girardeau. It's southern Missouri, a small town. I was working with a hospital there. And in the book, he was talking about, now this is 20 years ago, he was talking about a McDonald's. And just for anybody who's wasn't in the workforce then, there were labor shortages before, and then we worked through them. But what McDonald's was doing at that point, because they couldn't find people to work 24 hour or the night shift, and there was a shortage, they had a call center. So when you drove up to the drive-through window, it basically, the person taking your order was in Nebraska. There was in another state. So I know we got global listeners here. They may not know all the dynamics, but it was in another state. It was hundreds of miles away. And the order was taken by a call center that the call center then transmitted that to who was ever in the kitchen, who was ever on the fryer and making the food. And then you picked it up in the window. Now, if we go, I don't know why that went away, but maybe because there was abundance of people and helping the economy and so forth. But the technology was there 20 years ago to be able to do it. So I'd expect that more of that might happen. That why do you need a body just to take the order? And with payless, with paperless, currency, you can do that. I mean, it does knock out a portion of the population who still likes to use cash. But you could literally automate that whole thing. But now with robotics, you probably can even prepare the food. So there could be a minimum contact. I know the challenge for a lot of fast food, we had a 24-hour diner that was 2 blocks away, walking distance from our home. Not that we went there in the middle of the night, but it was open 24 hours a day, except for Thanksgiving and Christmas. They now close 9 o'clock at night. And again, many of the places that were open till even 1 or 2 in the morning are now closed earlier, and they realized that it just wasn't profitable, or they just frankly can't get that. So if we're going to move back to that point, there's going to be a lot that's automated. You mentioned the QR codes, waiting for your server to come back so you can pay them. You can pay right through a tablet, right there. I guess what we could look forward in the next, 5 to 10 years. Are our meals going to be dropped by drones or by autonomous vehicles? I guess it probably depends where you live, and also what the demand is. But I would expect that we're going to see, more of that. But even automation, even the professional, even the knowledge workers. I do a lot of writing, as people might imagine. And every now and then you get this idea, and there's got to be a better way to say this. I use a program, it's called Word Hero. There's a whole bunch of them out there. I type what I'm saying, and the AI actually comes up with a bunch of different versions. So even, that's an innovation. That didn't replace me. Well, it probably did. It replaced somebody. It didn't replace me. But I might have gone out and said, gone up to Upwork or Fiverr, or hired somebody, a copywriter, to be able to do it. And now all I have to do is know how to copy and paste, a few words into a software program, and it creates that on its own. I do like you. I mean, we're doing a podcast. I will take segments that I have a program that'll actually, as soon as something's broadcast, it'll take the feed and it will pull out like 10 minute segments of that. It doesn't do it very well, or at least not to my liking. I would say half of them are pretty good, and then you just have to tweak the beginning and the end. But again, you would have to hire somebody that knows how to do video editing or audio editing to be able to do that. So those are all, there's probably a million examples of that. Surgeons, or cancer oncologists, when they're looking for treatments, famously, they used a version of Watson, IBM's Watson, to be able to do that because they were much more accurate. And Watson can read 8,000 journals a week and digest that information and come out with the best possible therapy, where it would take, probably 8,000 surgeons or oncologists to read through all that and then meet and discuss it and which ones were better. And the AI had much higher success rates than the individuals, and it's just impossible to be able to keep up, with all that work. So again, there's probably people that have a lot of better examples, but I think autonomous vehicles will be a role. And
Yeah, we've seen some being autonomous buses here in the Gold Coast where they're driving. They only drive about 2 or 3 blocks, but they're like actually transporting people now. It's kind of fascinating. But so when you think about that, and that there will be segments of jobs eliminated, and you touched on that, some of those might be frontline, and but then there's even some aspects of knowledge workers roles that'll go away. um what do people need to be thinking about and be prepared for then in regards to their future of and work?
so there's two sides to that. One is there's the employer side. If you're looking to hire people, what do they need to do differently? And then it's what do the individuals need to do differently? And some of it overlaps. There's obviously an overlapping circle there, that there's some commonality between what they both need to do. From the employer side, there's definitely going to be there has to be. It's not that there's going to be. There already is an emphasis on the experience, whatever you want to call it. We talk about all the time. We have a model called ACE, and this goes back to the people, so I'll tie it in there. Where ACE is abilities, character, and environment. And we look at people's ability to change, adapt, because regardless if it's transformative change, disruptive change, or just tweaks in your day-to-day life, we all need to be a bit more adaptive. But when we looked on the environmental side, which the company side, there were 3 dimensions that really hit home. And one of them was company support. Do the people feel that do the employees feel that the company management has their back? Are they concerned with them? The second was, and we'll come back to that just in a second, but team support. Do they feel that their manager has their back and their coworkers? Do they feel good around that? And that's generally doing pretty well with the teamwork, not necessarily managers. And then it looked at the work environment from a psychologically safe space. Is it okay? Can you be authentic? Can you say, I'm having trouble? I need to be home with my kids, or I need, I'm sort of stuck in the job right now, or I need some help. So or I've got a great idea.
Right.
I think we can do this a better way. Do they feel safe in introducing those ideas? So it looked at company support, team support, and psychological safety. And as you can imagine, I mean, the scores are all over the board as we assess people, as we assess organizations. But most people like the people they work with. They don't always feel that the manager has their back, but that's okay, because it's also really scary. When you think about this, it's really scary to quit your job. Because on one side, if you have a growth mindset and it's a new opportunity and they're offering you more money and it's a better place, maybe they're running away from a bad environment. So it's a good exit. Sometimes it's just a better opportunity. I like where I am, but this is an opportunity I just can't turn down for whatever reason. But when you look at, there's a research that's called, it's the Holmes and Ray, and it's been out for years, and it looked at the stress factors in people's lives of what's the most stressful things. And people might have done this as a quiz, and it was like, you got a traffic ticket, you got X number of points, you broke up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, your hours changed at work, there was a death in the family, you got married. So there were points that were assigned to all these life events that we all go through all the time. Well, the crazy thing is quitting your job or changing your job. You don't have to quit, but changing your job is as stressful as the death of a close friend. So when you think of the stress involved and the grief involved if a close friend dies, and not sick but dies, changing a job has the same effect
Hmm.
on you. So it's really, really stressful for people to say, I'm going to quit. It's not a good sign for employers that people are willing to do that and get out, of a bad environment or toxic environment like that, because it's not easy for them. Because when you think about it, not only do they have to leave their friends that they may like, but they have to change the routine. They have to, they're used to the same routine. They pass the Dunkin' Donuts or the Starbucks, on the way in. They have the route lined up. They know how long it takes. They know all the tricks of the trade. Now they have to have a new route. They have to meet new people. They have a new boss. They don't know what the expectations are. There's all this new stuff that people don't like, because as humans, we're addicted to certainty, and we like that predictability. So people are really hesitant to quit their job. So when we go back to that psychological safety and team support and company support, for people to it's a good sign. Is like, how prone are we going to be to lose some of our talent, any talent, even average talent? Maybe you're happy to see the bad talent go, but even if somebody's just comes in and does their job, but they're not excelling, at least at this point, I think companies got to smarten up and wise up to do it. No surprise, company support on every survey that comes out, and including in our research, is not very good. People don't think that employers are doing enough to have their back. So on the plus side, on the CPR side, it's like, how can we breathe new life into an organization? Is what needs to change? What has to happen for companies, for employees, for workers to feel that the organization is doing enough, that senior level management, the owners, really do care about you. And there are companies that have done that, very well. It's hard in this environment because people have options now. But most companies didn't really focus on employee experience. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've really focused on the recruitment, the candidate side, people coming into the workforce. I wrote a book on it, Recruiting in the Age of Globalization. It was about that candidate experience. And that was pretty atrocious, because we still have HR, we still have ghosting. People apply for a job, they don't hear. They hear that the application was accepted, and then it goes weeks or months in between scheduling for an interview, or they get scheduled for the interview. What happens after that? And then they're ready they get a job offer, and it's days and weeks till they hear back, and then they show up for the job on the first day, and there's nobody there to greet them, and they're not ready. So that whole experience is now, people said, I don't have to do that anymore. And now they're interviewing and go, what's it like if I choose to work for you and you hire me? What can I expect on day one? And it's not the millennial thing anymore of, hey, I want to have your job. I want to be CEO in 2 years. It's simple things. Like, if I show up on the first day, what happens? Who do I talk to? How do I know the ins and outs? Who's on my team? People are much more concerned with that relationship. So there's a huge opportunity. The bar is really low. Good news to everybody listening. On employee experience, the bar is really, really low. You don't have to be the best. You need to improve. But to step over that bar and get above your competition, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. Now, I expect that over the next few years, it's going to get a lot more challenging and a lot more difficult. But employee experience from the employer side, whatever you want to call it, and employee experience is beyond engagement. And it's really even all about the employee emotional health, what's their well-being. Until companies really start to care about that, it's going to be a challenge. But that doesn't mean all the emphasis, all the burden needs to be shouldered by the executives and managers. Employees have a role in this too. So on the employee side, there was 5 dimensions that were identified that have a high impact on future performance. And when you roll them up into one, it talks about adaptability. McKinsey identified last year, and people can look this up, the number 1 skill that employers are going to need for: 1 is employability, 2 is career satisfaction, life satisfaction, and making money. So it had a high correlation with all those 4, was adaptability. When you break adaptability down, It's a couple things. You need to be gritty. You need to be resilient. We applaud that. Companies want people that are gritty and resilient. They want to hire people that are gritty and resilient. I got news for you. Gritty and resilient doesn't get people to move forward. If you're gritty, you keep going. And if you're resilient, you get knocked down, you go back and bounce back. The problem is that, and you can look at healthcare and nursing. They're gritty. Nurses are gritty. They keep showing up for work, and they keep getting pushed back, and they bounce and they come back again, and they're down and they're back. But eventually you wear out, and that's the burnout and the stress. Those are the high rates you see. So the other components of that are really important, that individuals need to take this on their own, but companies need to support it. One is, if your listeners are familiar with the concept of a growth mindset, people have versus a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset says, well, I'm not very good at this. I'm good at, I'm not compassionate, or I'm just not an empathetic person, or I'm just not good with math, or I'm not good with numbers, or I'm not good with technology. Everybody has the ability with practice to improve. You don't have to be perfect, but you can improve. But there's certain people that just say, I hear this all the time as an older baby boomer. Well, I'm too old to do what you do, and I'm older than they are. But I hear this from family members. I hear this from workers. It's like, well, you're just really good at it. Now, I worked hard at it. I didn't have a degree in technology. I learn, I read, I study. I want to know how to do it. And there's certain things I do every day that I'm not perfect, and there's people better than me, but at least I try it. So again, goes back to the psychological safety. You have to set up an environment that allows that to happen, but people have to take it on their own to help improve that their willingness, their motivation to try new things and be willing to make some mistakes and accept challenges. And then we look at mental flexibility, which is the ability to deal with misinformation and disinformation, which we certainly have our share about. And the final one is unlearning, which is interesting because we keep talking about continuous learning. We need to always be learning. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's the learning gets in the way of, no, we just have to stop doing the stupid things that we've been doing. We need to unlearn what doesn't work anymore. Yeah. And we might have the tools, but you can't be moving forward. And, for anybody who likes baseball, I'm not a big baseball fan, but the analogy works. You can't steal second base when your foot's on first. Right. Right. You got to move. And there's certain people that are just stuck, that they don't want to give up what's worked for them for 20 years, yet they have the tools and the ability to move on or move forward and change. So, we look at what the burden that falls on individuals, what they should focus on. Number one, I always say, is growth mindset. If you don't have that, nothing else works. But if you're not familiar with it, you can go up to my websites or just type in growth mindset. There's lots of stuff out there about it, and learn about it, and then figure out how to develop it. But grit and resilience is still important. Mental flexibility, on learning. If you have those 5 skills, there's not much that you can't do. You still, if you want to be a surgeon or a pilot or an engineer, you still kind of have to go to school and learn that stuff. Right. This isn't going to carry you through. But for even a frontline worker, that whatever skills they have, they're in the trades, they're in construction, they're working in retail, they're in sales, customer service. Those are the skills that are going to make you those are the in-demand high skills. And McKinsey's not the only one. World Economic Forum identified it. Yeah. As a driver.
Well, we've covered a lot of great information, Ira, but we kind of reached the end. So I'd love to hear what 3 things you'd like to leave behind with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate it so much, Janet. Did a lot of talking here. Number one is for the employee, well, both for employers and employees. The labor shortages aren't going away. I called it the perfect labor storm 25 years ago, and it's landed. It's here. It's like climate change. It crept up on us, and it's really here. The other is for employers. I would say that they really need to embrace what a good, positive employee experience is going to look like. Mm-hmm. And frankly, you can talk to your employees just by talking to them. Sets creates an opportunity.
Mhm.
It's a positive. You're asking them, what do they need? And you may not be able to promise them everything, but some of them may be real simple, and then try to create a plan with them, collaborate to form that. And for individuals, again, the most workers, employees have identified that they're willing to take a pay cut for better work-life balance. You certainly need money to pay your bills, so we're not talking about working for cheap. But there are ways to do it, but a job's not guaranteed. High wages aren't guaranteed. Your future jobs are not guaranteed. The life cycle of a skill today is about 5 years. So you could be at the peak of the mountain this year, and in 5 years you're going to be outsourced or replaced or modified, because at least 1/3 of everybody's jobs. 1/3 of everybody's jobs will be automated. And I gave you examples of even a consultant, how that could happen. So everybody's going to have to be more adaptive and develop the grit and the resilience. And my favorite place, I tell everybody, because I went through that as someone who had a fixed mindset and said, I was too old and I wasn't very good at doing this and I didn't have this opportunity. And it hit me about 30 years ago. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be easy, but you can do it. So the three is work shortages aren't going away. Employers, think about employee experience. Individuals think about what they can do to become more adaptable.
Good tips. Would love for you to share how people can get in contact with you and buy your book, or.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy. One is you probably can type Ira Wolfe into Google. Googleization is my code word for the convergence of business, technology, and people. My book is Recruiting in the Age of Globalization. It's available up on Amazon. To contact me, two easiest ways is you can go to my website, which is irawolfe.com. With Wolfe is with an E. And you can also, I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. And you can reach out to me. Just let me know that you heard me on corporate CPR, and I'll be sure to connect with you and have a conversation. And I put out a lot of material. I'm a content creator, just living in an HR world and leadership role. So there's a lot of content that we put out, and love to help you. The other place we talked about growth mindset is aqplusmindset.com. AQ is an adaptability quotient. Mindset.com. It's actually on my shirt for those that can see that. And we talk a lot about growth mindset up there as well. And then there's a coaching program there if anybody's interested.
All right. Well, great. Thanks so much for your time today, Ira, and your great advice.
Thanks so much. Stay safe, everyone.
Yeah. And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.